Hey everyone, I'm Jeremy Watson, joined by Harris, Matt, and Larissa. We're here to talk about what's ahead for the managed stage in 13.9, releasing February 22nd. Melissa Ushikoff of the Access Group will be doing her own video. But without further ado, Matt, what's ahead for compliance? Take it away, sir.
Thanks, Jeremy. So let me share my screen. So there's several things that we've been refining for some time that I'm pretty excited about. The first is we've been in the process of making the compliance frameworks customizable. Previously, they were these, I think, 5 predefined or hard-coded labels. And so customer feedback was, hey, that's great, but like we have these things that aren't listed here. And so we also found it was an opportunity to then use these frameworks for something in particular, and that something is the inclusion of centrally managed compliance pipeline configurations. So one of the issues for 13.9 is adding this input field. That's a terrible backdrop, but it's an input field where somebody, when they create one of these compliance frameworks, can say, any project that uses this framework, I want it to point to this compliance YAML that's centrally managed somewhere by my compliance or security team. And then once that's set, then in the project, we'll see in the CI/CD settings, this read-only field for visibility for maintainers and such, where that pipeline configuration is coming from. So when a project runs its local CI YAML, it'll incorporate this centrally managed one that's hosted external to that project. And the custom frameworks is the mechanism by which we're creating that relationship. The other thing is we're making that particular setting, the application of the compliance framework, only available or editable by group owners. So in 13.8, which is likely to slip into the first part of 13.9, is where we're introducing that only group owners can modify the setting. And this issue I'm showing specifically addresses the user experience to that, because the MVC is to basically remove the setting entirely. So the follow-on iteration is to show the setting again, but to make it read-only and explain why it's read-only to non-owners for transparency as to why it's behaving that way. But this would essentially address the concerns around separation of duties and in terms of who can apply the controls and who's bound by them. But just the general security posture or compliance posture of the project, because only certain individuals will be able to modify that. The other one is adding a project level setting to require a issue from Jira be linked to a merge request. This behavior doesn't really exist today in terms of enforcement. But if you have a Jira integration, you can associate the ticket by adding a title or a description element or content that links to the name of the Jira ticket. But here what we're doing is we're starting down the path to say, at a project level, we're going to require that this relationship or this link exists before the MR can be merged. And this is coming about from the need for organizations to have documented change management processes. So when a change is being shipped, you have to know why. Why is the change being made? Who reviewed the change? Who approved the change? What environment is it going to, et cetera? And so we're starting to iterate towards this future state where customers can achieve all of that. That was just close up. And then let's see, another one is we're adding option enforcement for SSH keys to self-managed for now. We'll follow that on for SaaS customers as well. But the rationale here is that we introduced an expiration policy for personal access tokens, and then we also added a toggle there that says you can have this enforcement be programmatic, but some organizations find that very disruptive. I tend to agree with that, and so there's a toggle to make that enforcement optional. So the instance admin would still be notified that a credential has expired, and they can take action through things like the credential inventory where you can revoke or delete credentials. But it wouldn't necessarily be immediately disruptive to the end user who may not know, may not have the time, or just something like that. So it gives a little bit more flexibility to credential management. And the last one is we are in the process of bringing merge request approval rules to the group level, but it's going to take us some time because it's a lot of work involved there. And so in 13.9, we're expecting to complete one of the iterations, which is to move the which is to add the prevent approval of merge request by merge request author checkbox to the group level. And this will be behind a feature flag until we've been able to pull all of these settings to the group level. So it's available if that reduced functionality is valuable, but until the holistic experience is there, we'll be slowly iterating behind that feature flag. So I think that pretty much sums up the major parts of 13.9 for compliance. Any questions?
That's awesome, Matt. There's so many great compliance changes there that are going to be super valuable for a lot of our customers. I'm still really impressed by the great work on tying CI to compliance frameworks. I know we've been iterating on compliance frameworks for quite a while, and I think it's a great idea to tie that to CI in the way that you've done. I'm really curious though, if I'm a developer and I am working in a project that has a kind of mandated compliance pipeline based off of the compliance pipeline location feature you just described about, can I write like additional CI rules to run on top of that? How does that work? Or are my hands kind of tied by that external pipeline?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer is yes, a developer can write additional jobs or add additional stages even. The centrally managed pipeline would just provide a baseline so that the security or compliance team can say, I want to control these jobs or stages that have to run and in this particular order, which makes it uneditable or unmodifiable by the local project users, including developers and maintainers. So this way, that security compliance team can run their requirements as a baseline, and then the developers still have flexibility to do what might be fairly nuanced for their application in terms of builds, tests, maybe other scans, just kind of gives them that flexibility.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's so cool. I love that feature. The other question I had was about the project setting to require Jira ticket association. I totally get the need for this. It makes a ton of sense. My question was, I wonder, like, did we ever consider tying that requirement to GitLab issues instead? And my idea was, I don't know what the status of our integration plans are with Jira, but if we made that generic so that you just say we've tied it to an issue, and then a user can use whatever tools that they want to in order to create the issue. And so it doesn't have a hard requirement into Jira. Do you ever consider that? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, we've considered it. I think there's the primary motivation for starting here first, at least, is that there's a lot of customer demand for it. So we're trying to solve what I colloquially refer to as fires. We have large customers who have upcoming audits or maybe just had an audit where this became problematic for them. And so this was the fastest way we could deliver the value to them. And Jira seems to be the service that's used most, at least in the customers we spoke to. I do think a generic integration or relationship makes more sense, but I think this buys us the time to work towards that and could probably iterate on this existing feature. And it also helps that the Jira integration already existed, so we're just leveraging that existing work rather than creating something else that would be more work.
Cool. Got it. Thanks a lot. Harris, you had a question.
Yes, so the requirements that you're adding, such as the Jira ticket requirement, I assume those are all just disabled by default. Is that accurate?
I think that's accurate. And I say I think because I think that makes sense. We haven't made a decision on that, to be totally transparent. I think that makes sense though, because organizations are going to say, yes, I want that enabled, but it is disruptive, which I think is generally contrary to our philosophy at GitLab to not impede developers. So I think it would make sense to have it toggled off by default, but a lot of the customers make that change, but I don't know. I also know we have principles to be on by default. So Jeremy, I don't know if you or Harris or Larissa, anyone has an opinion or thought there.
Yeah, I'd say that, on by default, a feature that expands your abilities, but something that actually restricts your ability from doing something, which is a lot of the compliance stuff. I would actually even state that that's our posture, is that, these are things that you can restrict on your own, but we probably shouldn't come out with a blank instance that has all the restrictions on, because that'd be really hard to unwind or use or learn.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's or I know that's also a large motivation behind the compliance frameworks, was we were trying to, like the base premise there was to reduce the blast radius of these controls. So like with the compliance pipeline, it shouldn't apply to every single project in an instance because, or a top level group, because it just shouldn't. Like not all projects are sensitive or regulated. And so same with this is I'm sure not all projects are regulated. And so we have an iterative issue to bring this to the group level because we know that it needs to be there at some point. Now that the Jira integration is also supported at the group and instance level, it aligns with that paradigm as well. And so we'll probably eventually tie these into the frameworks at some point to be able to reduce that blast radius and stay with that premise of not being disruptive if we don't have to be.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Matt. Harris, over to you.
Cool, thank you. Let me share my screen and tell you all about what import's planning to do for 13.9. So we're going to do kind of more of the same in a way. I've been talking about the group migration feature for a couple of milestones now, and we're currently marching toward achieving parity with, just want to make sure you can see my screen being shared, right?
Yes.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I didn't have the green boundary around it. So the next up in our search for, in our like quest for parity with the current group export import is completing the epics migration. So in the MVC, we have some of the basic fields of epics being migrated, such as title, description, state, but none of the relationships. So things like labels, comments, notes are not being migrated over. So to complete this, we have identified about 7 different issues that all roll up to the epic completion epic. And we expect to make a good dent in that feature in 13.9. We should be able to get through at least a half, if not a little bit more than a half of the issues in 13.9. And at the end of this, we will have the ability to migrate not just the group, but also all the epics and everything associated with the epics underneath that, and that's going to get really close to the parity with the current group export import. And on the other side, I've been kind of thinking and discussing how we would, or whether we would be able to maybe deprecate the current file-based group export import, or at least reduce the maintenance on it, given that we have a solution that might be able to do the same job. So that's the primary goal for 13.9. In addition to that, we are going to be paying attention to the usability of the same features. So on the front end side, we are looking to add the pagination for the group migration list. I'm showing a screenshot of what that list sort of looks like right now, and there is no way to get to the second page or to paginate. So we're looking to first implement a standard pagination that we have on a lot of our other lists, but we're also gonna, that's what's coming in 13.9. And, but at the same time, we're also looking to expand that feature with something that we're gonna really need in order to scale this experience to users who may have hundreds or thousands of different groups that they need to migrate. So in addition to creating the regular pagination, adding the regular pagination feature, we're looking to also provide the ability to select the size of the page, which is something that a lot of lists out there have, and it's something users are used to and expect to have. And for us, it's almost going to be a must, because having just 20 per page means that we still are not going to be able to do a lot of large or bulk imports at the same time, because it's still going to have to be a 20 groups per click. Currently, I think, so this is just a an illustration of what that might look like, I think our choices for the page might be more like 20, 50, and 100. 100 is something that we currently have as a limit in GraphQL for a lot of our API calls, so we won't be able to get past that. But we should have the ability to show 100 of something in a list if the user chooses to do so, and if they have real estate on their screen. So that's how we're going to look to improve the current pagination. And we are, I believe, the first ones to do this. So this will then become available for other places that show lists to sort of take advantage of that ability to select a page size. We also identified a usability issue with the GitHub importer, and that's something we're going to continue to pay attention to as well. And this one was about being able to automatically refresh the status. I don't have a great screenshot for this, but if you imagine on this page, if I click the import, the status does not automatically refresh. You're stuck on that page and having to like manually refresh the page to see if the import has completed or not. And that's something that that we're gonna have to fix. Finally, I have two instrumentation issues that we're going to be playing. One is getting to a single usage metric for the project import Gmail, so we can have one number to track for the group monthly active users count. And once that's completed, we're going to make sure that our counts, which are currently not accurate, become more accurate. So our counters for usage of each one of the imports. So not talking about users. In this case, we're talking about just how many imports were triggered. The calculation is off, and we're going to make sure that we update these. And this will also give us the ability to finally then see the usage for importers from self-managed instances. Currently, we have that for SaaS only, and this issue will finally clean that up and make it so that we can get the same kind of data from self-managed. I believe that's all I had. Questions?
I'm still typing. I wanted to just say thanks for prioritizing the instrumentation. I'm really excited to see our dashboards all built out. You talked about completing Epic's migration. Are there any other objects that you feel like we need to kind of think about after Epics, or is that kind of the main thing that's kind of standing between feature parity with the existing feature?
So it's a great question. Epics is really the big one, and the most probably going to take the most time to get done. But in addition to that, we have some usability issues that we would need to get take care of. And for example, our ability to not just pick a top level group, but also be able to pick a subgroup and migrate it as well, which is something that you currently can do with project export, with group export import. But in our case, we're only allowing you to pick a single top group for export. So getting to some of that. And then finally, migrating labels that are the group level, migrating milestones, iterations, badges, and boards. So all of those things that are currently included in the group export import, we should be able, we will need to have in order to achieve that parity. That said, I believe the Epics one is going to be a largest and also be kind of the first one where we get to that complete everything is now working state, and should hopefully then make it easier for us to migrate some of the smaller objects.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I assume boards, which you mentioned, is also a really important one that we'll probably need to think about afterwards. But great, yeah, epics have always been a challenge, so this will be this is super exciting.
Thanks.
Cool. Larissa, I think you have a comment, and then over to you for Optimize.
Yes, I just wanted to say I'm really excited about the work that you're doing to migrate the epics. That seems like a really valuable piece of work that will make the decision to move over to GitLab a lot easier.
Thank you.
You're here.
Okay, sharing my screen. First up, we have a little bit more work to do on the user availability work. So we added a busy indicator recently. And so the way that works is if you click into your name and edit status, you can select busy, and that appears in a number of different places throughout the UI. So for example, you can see here that I have it set. If I scroll down to my name in the comments and hover over my name, I can see that I'm busy. We also want to add this to the sidebar. So for example, when you're assigning a merge request to a user, and the user's name pops up, you'll see busy next to the user's name. So that will make it really obvious when you're trying to assign an MR that the person is currently at full capacity. Also, we are working on scheduling unsetting that status because I've already done this. You can set your status to busy and then forget to remove that status. So we'll be in the set status area, we'll be adding some options to unschedule that status after a certain amount of time. Next up, we have some work that carried over from 13.8 for value stream analytics. So we've been working on migrating to this horizontal navigation, and we will be removing this vertical navigation. We still have a bit more work to do on that. So we're hoping to wrap that up in 13.9 and also switch this view to a table, which will allow us to do more things like sorting on that table. For DevOps reports, we had added the ability to add a new segment in this table. So this is an adoption table that shows you the features that your teams have adopted, the GitLab features. We added a segment selector, which allows you to combine projects and groups. But there was some concern that this adds too much complexity, given that we already have the concept of groups and projects, and this would be another concept. So we're actually flipping that to groups. So in this table, you'll be able to add groups rather than create this concept of segments. So we'll be working on switching to more of a group focus in 13.9. And then beyond 13.9, we're going to start looking at how we can make this adoption table available at the group level. And then we have a little chunk of work on merge request analytics. The first thing we're going to do here is add a container up the top here that will show the mean time to merge. We've already done the back end work for this, so it's just a matter of adding it to the front end. And this will show, based on the filters that you've set here and the time range that you've specified, how long on average it takes from the time an MR is open until it's merged. Also on merge requests, we're going to add another filter option. So one thing that we've found at GitLab is that sometimes we want to look at these metrics but exclude the contributions made from external contributors, community members. And so we're going to add a filter that will allow you to do that, either by saying does not equal contributor, which is a label that we use, or by based on the access level that the user has. So you could specify minimum of a developer level, and that would exclude any guest contributions, so that you can see what your internal teams are delivering. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing and flip over to questions.
Yeah, I just had a few comments. I think the first one was to say just thank you for pivoting on the adoption report. I think that there's a lot of small changes there that are going to address some of the concerns, and I'm really excited to see that feature at the group level. as you pivot, I think just keep in mind where the future of that feature is going, because the current report with the the Boolean, the filled in dots, we want to move beyond that eventually. So it's important that we kind of like keep that in mind and what future visualizations we want to make sure we're keeping that in mind as we kind of like lay the foundation for this at the group level. The other thing is to say just thanks a lot for focusing on usability. Like you were talking about the busy status, and it's like a general comment because I can see usability as like a focus on all the things everyone is working on. Like Harris, you talked about, you know, the pagination and some thought that you went into there to make sure it's a great feature. Matt, you're like very thoughtful about the user experience with the compliance frameworks. And I think that like the busy status that you talked about, Larissa, it's not directly related to like our immediate goals that we kind of have shifted towards, but it's still like a great addition. It's going to make the product more lovable. So thank you all for focusing on usability. And then I'm really excited to see the MR analytics improvements. So please consider as that gets built out, continuing to drive internal adoption of that, making sure you're talking about this and with engineering leadership and making sure that we're getting feedback from folks to make sure that this is something that we can start using internally. Because I think that we've still yet to get like a ton of traction with this feature, but people are excited about where it's going. So great stuff.
Actually,
thank you.
I think there's a lot more we can do on the internal adoption as we get closer to meeting the needs internally. Yeah, so it's a great point. Thank you.
At one point, our goal was to get to remove the need to have any engineering productivity charts in Sisense and to have them all embedded in the handbook. So that still is like a worthy goal. I still think DevOps reports is the most valuable and highest ROI feature that we have. But I think that that's also like an interesting goal to keep in mind for maybe this year to say, hey, how can we pull as many of those engineering productivity charts out of Sisense and into the handbook so we can just embed them directly? I think it'd be pretty cool. All right, cool. Harris, did you want to just voice over what you said there?
Yeah, I'm very excited about just using all analytics features, not just analytics. So Larissa, please consider just using me. If you feel like there's anything that we could get value out of at GitLab, I'd like to try it and give you feedback on it. So just use me as your lab rat.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate that.
Harris is awesome with that.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right, we're a little over time. Thank you all so much for the great video. It's great seeing you all. Cheers, everyone. Bye.